What exactly are business rates in plain English?
Business rates is a property tax that everybody pays on non-domestic property, whether you're in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland.
Is it the same calculation and policy across all of the geographical regions? So is it the same in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland?
Right. They all have a business rate system, but they have different bodies who manage them, and then it's the government who set the multiplier.
How often do rates change?
Well, used to change every 5 years. The idea behind shorter lists is...
So the flexi workspace is a good opportunity. Any other good spots at the moment?
Last mile logistics, that is a big growth area.
I've not heard of that. Tell me more.
Building wealth through property isn't about chasing big deals and paydays. It's about owning assets that make money for you consistently. But figuring it all out on your own, that's where most people get stuck. That's why we created this Property Life membership. It's everything we wish we had when we started. Expert guidance, real-world case studies, and a private community of investors actually doing deals, not just talking about them. So you could spend years trying to piece it all together yourself, or you could plug into a system that's already working for our community. Check out our membership page at This Property Life. Everything you need to know is right there. Success is a team sport. Come join in.
In this episode of This Property Life, I'm joined by Mark Paterson, business rates expert and senior associate at Montagu Evans. Mark has more than a couple of decades experience in what's, let's be honest, isn't the sexiest part of property investing, but you need to know about business rates and you ignore them at your peril. So Mark is here to demystify the topic with a rapid fire Q&A that cuts straight to what investors, operators and landlords actually need to know. We're going to cover what business rates are and what they aren't, who's liable and when, and the impact on serviced accommodation, commercial conversions, all that good stuff. And then we're going to deep dive into some of the key changes coming in 2026 and what you should be doing now to prepare. So some of the common myths, the costly mistakes that you'll want to avoid. So if you're running any kind of commercial unit, mixed use, any kind of serviced accommodation, co-working space, whatever it is, just thinking about getting into commercial, then this episode is a must listen. I'm your host, Sarah Blaney, and let's make business rates simple. So welcome, Mark, to This Property Life.
Thank you, Sarah.
Heads up before we start the show. This Property Life is more than just a brilliant podcast. We are also a thriving network community. We meet online every single week with different property experts and in real life every single quarter to share war stories and insider tips. And the best bit is you can get this absolutely free for 2 months. So head to the link in the description and start networking smart. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the episode. We're going to go into a rapid fire Q&A just to get some of that really good information that's in your head out so that everyone else can benefit from it. So let's go. Mark, what exactly are business rates in plain English?
Right. Business rates is a property tax that everybody pays on non-domestic property, whether you're in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. So it could be a shop, an office, a holiday home, a school or a hospital, just to name a few.
And I'm going to add a question in. Is it the same calculation and policy across all of the geographical regions? So is it the same in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland?
Right. They all have a business rate system, but they have different bodies who manage them. So in England, the valuation office in England, Wales, they set the rateable value. In Scotland, it's the assessor. And in Northern Ireland, it's another body. I think it's called NIS. So they are the ones that set the rateable value. And then it's the government who set the multiplier.
Okay, so there's some commonality. There's just
yes,
different.
And there are also a few little differences. Yes, they will value the property the same way. They all talk to each other and agree the basis. So if you've got a petrol station, they will do it the same way, whether you own a petrol station in Scotland or in Wales. And if you have an office, the values might be different, obviously, but the methodology behind it will be the same.
Okay, what does all the money go towards?
Okay. You pay your money, it goes to the local authority. They act as an agent to hold the money. Some of it they give to government and some of it they keep as their budget. And then they use this to fund local services. So your bins, the schools, social care, highways, they all fund those day-to-day things that you use when you engage with the council.
Okay, so it's a property tax on businesses, but then it goes back to community.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Does the use class of the property affect the rateable value? So, for anyone listening, what I mean by use class is, and it differs between the geographical regions, but in England, we have things like C1, which is hotels, we've got C4, which is HMOs, we've got Class E, which is a broad range of commercial. And does that type of use class affect rateable value?
Well, the use class will affect the description, which will affect the value. So in a way, yes, it does, but all hotels will be in the same use class, but it won't mean that they're the same value. They'll all be valued based on their business. So the use class has an impact on how it would be described, but it doesn't have an impact on how it's going, if so everybody would be in the same use class, it won't differ. What will differ is, so you've got a B2 warehouse, but yours is from the 1950s, and your next door neighbours, he's got a newer one from 1990s. They're both in the same use class, but completely different values. They could be the same size, but obviously one's newer than the other. So there'll be differences like that based on age and construction type and stuff that come into it. So it gets a bit more detailed.
Okay, so we're not going to deep dive into the calculations because I think we'd be here all day. But just generally, then, like if you were looking within the same use class, so let's go back to that warehouse. We've got a B2 warehouse, both the same footprint, square footage, and one is constructed in a different era to another by 30 odd 45 years or whatever it is. How does the business rates actually get calculated for those two?
Okay, so the valuation officer, they have powers to send people out information forms. You may have seen one asking you what the rent is for your accommodation. So what they do is they send this out to every occupier during the life of a list, and you fill in that. You could own it and just tell them it's freehold, or you could rent it. You fill in the form, send it back. They analyze that information, and they then build up a basket of evidence for, say, go back to the 1990s warehouse, and they'll say, oh, that's in at £45 a square metre based on the rental evidence that we've compiled. And then the 1950s one could be in at 30 because of the evidence, because they could be on an industrial estate and there's lots of evidence of 1990s and 1950s. So they'll put that all together. And I call it a basket because sometimes you'll have some that are quite high and some that are quite low, and they tend to try and go with the middle. And so that's very quick how they would do that. So they put all the evidence together and will value it that way.
Okay, so they come up with this figure of like £45 per square meter, or did you say meter or per
Meter?
square?
Yes.
So, and each situation will have a different pounds per square meter that is applicable. It's then times by the actual square meter of that property, and you have then your rateable value. Is that right?
Yeah, on a quite basic level, yes.
Yeah. And the rent that's being paid by the tenant will affect that number and the area, and what other factors will affect that 45 in that instance?
Okay, so if you've got a warehouse, a tenant could go in and build a mezzanine to use it for storage. That will increase the value because you've increased the amount of accommodation. You could build an office block in the front of the warehouse. Again, that will add to the original assessment. Also for warehouses, eaves height, because if you've got a distribution shed, you want the roof as high up as you can, so you can put more racking in to store products for your customers. So it's things like that. And then you've got plant machinery. That's a whole other conversation. But basically, CCTV cameras are rateable. The security fencing around it it goes on and on. They all get valued and added in. So you could have two identical buildings next to each other, and one pays a lot more than the other because they've improved it. They've added security, they've added a mezzanine floor, and they've added an office. So when you're looking at them, it's not always as quite straightforward as you think, and going, why is my neighbour paying less than me? He's paying less than you because he necessarily hasn't invested in his property like you have. Unfortunately, you invest in your property and you do get, well, you used to get penalised, but now there is improvement relief. You get that for a year. If you increase the value of your property by building the extension, building the mezzanine, and the value increases, you get 100% relief on that increase for a year. Historically, that didn't happen. So you would always get penalised for investing in your property. But now you actually do get a relief for a year for investing, which can be quite good.
Yeah, it does sound like you're penalised for making
Yeah.
improvements.
Yes, but that way then you've got a year to build up to pay for the increase. So it is beneficial.
So let's talk about some of the magic numbers around business rates. And I'm not going to go into the detail of all of it, but there are some magic numbers in terms of like small business rate relief. What is the number that kicks in at?
Right. So if the best example of that is serviced offices, you've got multiple assessments and lots of small users. What you want there is a rateable value under £15,000. So under 12,000 is the magic number, because under 12,000, you don't pay anything if they qualify for small business rates relief. Now, I have to say that you have to be able to qualify. So it has to be your only property. If you've got others, you don't qualify, because that's the name's there, small business rate relief. So if your assessment's under 12,000, you don't pay any rates while you occupy. If you vacate, unfortunately, your landlord doesn't get the small business rate relief that you had. They would have to pay the empty rates, but your tenants will get it. Then between 12,000 and 15,000, the relief is tapered. So example is 13,500 RV, you'd get 50% relief. 14,000 is 33% relief. And then all the way up, when you get back to 15,000, you get no relief, 0%.
Okay.
So that's basically how small business rates relief works.
Is there any other magic numbers of either rateable value or anything like that we need to be aware of?
Well, for landlords, if you're looking at empty rates, if you've got a rateable value under 2,900, when it becomes vacant, you don't have any liability on it. But also, if you have a listed building, you don't pay empty rates on any empty assessments in your building if it's listed. So whether that's office, the ground, so say it's got ground floor shops or basement car park, any of those, if they've got their own assessment and they're empty on a listed building, you don't pay rates on.
It's like they've just got a bunch of different decisions, thrown them into a big pot, stirred them out, and then pick ones out at random. That's how it sounds to me, Mark. Is it that, or am I being mean?
No, because rates has been going 1601 with the Poor Act. And what's happened is things have been added to it over time. Because initially, it was just the landed gentry paid rates to look after the poor. That's hence the Poor Act. And it's been changed with legislation over time. We currently have the Local Government Finance Act 1988, which is the legislation that changes it. All they do is they just copy previous legislations, because we had the General Rate Act of 1967, and they pull bits and pieces that they like along and then add new pieces. So that's why it gets a bit clunky. So, you've got things that historically have been done one way and then they try to change it.
Yeah. So it's not a clean kind of start from a fresh thing. It's just, as you say,
it's got a lot of history. Yes. And there's a lot of case law
of history going on there.
Yes.
That's why it's
yes.
complex.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the difference between a rateable value and then what you actually pay? Assuming there's no small business rates relief, and we've sort of looked.
Yeah. So everybody starts at this point. So the rateable value is what is deemed to be the hypothetical rent that you would pay at the antecedent valuation date. Now, the antecedent valuation date is a fixed date 2 years before the list starts. So we're in the 2023 list currently. So the antecedent valuation date for this is the 1st of April 2021. So ideally, when you're looking at evidence, what you want is a property that was let as close to that date as possible. You can't always, because that's not how life works, but you get to it as close as you can. Sometimes you could be August 21. Anyway, you look at that evidence, and then they can use that, going back to the warehouse again, to produce the evidence to value it at the £45 a square metre. So then that gives you your rateable value. So just to make the maths easy, the warehouse is going to have a rateable value of £100,000. So that's what it is, potentially for 3 years of the 23 list, unless there's any changes go through. So you can appeal it to get it reduced, or the valuation officer can come round and go, oh, you've built those offices, you've built that mezzanine, so it'll need to go up to match those. So then what you do is you apply the multiplier onto the 100,000, which is currently 55.5p for large properties, anything over 51,000. And so then that means payable is 55,500 per year.
Okay, so it's the rateable value times this penny in the pound kind of figure.
Yes. If
And
you're
that
rateable
differs by a banding of what the rateable value is. So you said over 50k, it's currently 55 pence, but then there's different values, presumably.
Yes, 49.9 for any property under £51,000.
Okay.
So.
Right. Okay. So you get a rateable value of 100 grand. You internally die and think, what the hell have I just bought? And what's the liability that I've just bought? But it's not 100k, it's 100k times 0.55 in that instance. Still a big number, still a really big number. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that big number will change next year when there's a revaluation. Usually they adjust the multipliers as well as rateable values. So.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get into the 2026 changes in a bit. Now, we've spoken about small business rates relief already. We've spoken about exemptions in terms of empty properties and being a graded building. Are there any other exemptions or relief that people could be taking advantage of at the moment in the middle of 2025?
There are, but it's only for a small part of the market. It's for retail, hospitality and leisure. It's kind of still, COVID is still around, and so they're still getting a bit of relief. So shops, restaurants, cinemas, hospitality and leisure, there's a big list. And if you qualify, you can apply for 40% relief of your rates payable in this financial year.
Okay.
And as a company, you can apply for a maximum of £110,000. So if you've got 3 or 4 properties, you can apply for this relief on them, but you can only take £110,000.
Yeah, got it.
So some people, got 2 or 3 properties, they claim the full maximum and they're well under their limits. But others, they've got 25 sites, they can only get it on 3 or 4. But at least they get something.
So that last tax year, that was actually at 70%, wasn't it?
Yes.
And now it's moved to 40%. Is this the
so
end?
It went 70% in the first year, 70% in the second, and 40% in the third. Now, what's going to happen next year in 26 is they're getting rid of that relief. And what they're going to do is, so the multipliers we spoke about, they're going to introduce a new multiplier, well, 2 in fact. There'll be a new multiplier for retail, hospitality and leisure, which is supposed to be much lower than the 49.9 we have currently. And they're going to introduce a much higher one for people who've got a property with a rateable value of more than £500,000. So it's going to be self-funding. So basically, the people at the top end who've got the big properties will pay to support the small ones, the ones in the retail and hospitality and leisure industry.
Yeah, because I was going to
That's
say
the
that
idea.
come sort of March 26, April 26, if that 40% had just suddenly been stripped out, that would literally kill more of the high street than is already being killed. That would put people under, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So what they're doing instead is hopefully rateable values will come down again because of the nature of the high street. So hopefully they'll have two things that will help them. The rateable value will drop based on their property, and then the multiplier will also drop to reduce their liabilities.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we'll go into detail on that in just a sec. I've got another 4, I think, rapid fires for you. So, do business rates apply to serviced accommodation and short-term rents?
yes. So you mean by serviced apartments?
Yeah. So, like what a lot of people call Airbnb.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, so
So
that type.
indeed they do business rates, but they've got to be available for at least 140 days in a year and let out for a minimum of 70 days.
Okay.
If they don't, then they fall back into council tax,
Yeah.
which, depending on where they are, you wouldn't want that because the council tax will be quite substantial, because some people will know this now for second homes. They put it up each year 200%, 300%, 400% over a period of time because they want to try to force people to let them out, on short-term residential lets as opposed to holiday lets. That's the thinking behind that.
So I think this is one that has definitely changed over the last sort of 3 to 4 years. And I think it's in partnership with the changes that are happening in the SA market, service accommodation market, where they're going to be having a register. They just actually don't know how many serviced accommodation houses that are let on short-term lets there are. And I don't think they like that. So my viewpoint is that they're bringing in the business rates to incentivize people to register as a short-term stay operator for that property because, as you said, council tax can often be 200, 300, 400% if it's not let on an Airbnb or to a owner occupier. So that if you go on business rates, you can probably get, if it's your first one, small business rate relief. So they're incentivizing you monetary wise, and they're also obviously bringing in this register that's there. And then they'll have a good idea of how many there are in the country, and then they can tax you later on down the line. That's my point anyway. Okay, so there are obviously, as you said, there's a couple of conditions that you have to do for serviced accommodation. Does that mean then that if you are starting a serviced accommodation property today, you have to wait a year before you can actually get onto business rates?
No, you can apply and give them the information and show them what you're doing. But if at the end of the time they don't, then the council is more likely to say to the valuation office, we think that should go back to council tax because it's not qualifying. You might get away. They might be okay because you can see if the market has changed or there's local pieces, the council may not be quite so pushy to change it. They might be okay, we'll leave it. But it will go there and they will change it in the future. That's why they have those set minimums, because otherwise people could just say, this accommodation is, short-term never let it out, just to avoid paying the council tax on it. So there has to be minimum requirements to ensure that they're not, trying to avoid the council tax.
Okay. So in most instances in a commercial property, unless it's like this sort of serviced offices, the tenant is responsible for business rates. When the tenant vacates for whatever reason, then the liability falls to the owner of the property, the landlord. So what happens when that property is empty? That landlord has to pay the rate value. Do they get any reliefs?
They get empty property relief, but only if your tenant hasn't applied before they vacated. So it'll depend on what the wording is in your lease, because these days, a lot of landlords put in their leases that if the tenant claims the empty rate relief before they vacate, they have to pay it to you to stop them from doing it. So lots of tenants don't claim for it because they don't have to pay you back. So that's the one thing. So offices, shops, you get 3 months relief from the date they vacate. But industrial, you get 6 months. So most things, it's 3 months. And then what they do at that time is, after that period, is they'll charge you the rateable value times the multiplier. But here's the thing. If you've got a small property under 51,000, they will apply the higher multiplier. It's kind of a bit of a stick to get you to relet the accommodation.
As if it was just that easy though, Mark. As if it's that easy.
Exactly, yes. Now, I'm afraid here we've got the situation, it goes back to the 1970s when a gentleman had an office block in London and he sat on it because of the way the market was going. It was more valuable for him to sit on his office empty because every month the rental value increased. So if he'd let it out, he would have let it at a lower rate than the following month. So he kept it empty. And so because he kept it empty, there was no empty rates payable. The council couldn't do anything. So they were getting no money from this office block. Be very careful not to say where it was because it still exists today. And so the council were going, we've got to do something about this. So he sat there, which is able to do because that was the market at the time. But also from his point of view, why would I want to let something this week at, £150 a foot when next week it might be £200 a square foot because the demand was so much at that time because there wasn't too much grade A accommodation and he had grade A accommodation. So why would he want to restrict himself to what he could get for it?
Wow. So this one bloke has ruined it for all other landlords.
Well, he did for offices. Offices and shops, they brought in the 3-month rule and then you start paying. But industrial got changed under Gordon Brown because industrial, if it was empty, you didn't pay any rates on it. And then Gordon Brown did the maths and went, hold on, we're missing some money here. So he changed it. And you'll have seen things at the time, people knocked down buildings to avoid paying the empty rates because it wasn't worth it. Because people would buy redevelopment sites and going, well, I'm still putting the site together, but it's not worth me paying the rates, empty rates on the office block that I'm going to knock down in 2 years' time. Right, let's bring it forward. And so knock them down. So you'd have this situation, you'd have these sites that people were putting together where they're dropping buildings round because they were going to redevelop the whole site because they didn't want to pay the empty rates on them.
What I'm hearing at the moment is that business rates is almost as complex as our tax system, like for, corporation tax or income tax. It is as convoluted, complex, weird, and nuanced as that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And we haven't even got on to plant machinery yet. So
Oh, God, let's leave that one for another one. Okay, let's start talking about 2026. So you've mentioned that we're currently working from a 2023 list, which means that we're then actually working from a 2021 because it's 2 years before.
Yes.
Big changes. So and we're in 2025 now. How often do rates change? And what is that process? Let's talk about that now.
Yeah. Well, used to change every 5 years. So we had the 2000 list, 2005 list, then the 2010 list. The 2010 list, there was a recession and they changed it and it moved they moved it out an extra 2 years. So it became a 7-year list. Then we started in 2017. That became a 6-year list. And now they've got it back in law again, 3-yearly list. So we had the 23 list and we're going to have the 26 list. The idea behind shorter lists is if the market starts to drop, you don't want to be paying at the higher level of rateable value when the evidence is dropping. You want to follow it down. So that's the idea is it will change the rateable values and your liability quicker.
And when the market goes up, they get more money, obviously.
Again, yes. So swings and roundabouts, but you
Yeah.
would hope that, somebody benefits from it. So
Yeah.
we have these 3 yearly lists. They are the same in Scotland, but in Scotland, their AVD is 1 year earlier. So it's a bit closer again.
It's 2 years. They go backwards 1 year.
Yeah. Yes. So there's other bits and pieces that are a bit different, but that's a good one to explain. They do it slightly different point in time.
So in 26, we've already touched upon some of this. We've said some of the retail, hospitality and leisure rates are going to be taken away, which were our COVID reliefs of the 40% and whatnot. There are going to be some positive news for that sector. So tell us what actually changes in 2026.
So there'll be a revaluation based on the marketplace at the 1st of April 2024. So last year. So that will be, so many of people will have received rent return forms, 8-page document, probably filled it in online. Used to be a paper one. Now it's an online one. So you'll have got a 1-page sheet saying, you occupy this warehouse that we're talking about. We'd like to know what the rent is. So you fill it in, how long you've been in the property, what you've done to the property, how often are rent reviews, who pays the service charge, who pays the insurance, because sometimes they can all be rolled into the rent. The same with the rates, but sometimes they are individual payments. So it's all that kind of information is used for them to work out what the rental value will be for the property. And the 26 list, as in the 23 list, challenge appeal system will carry on. So the check is factual information. So when an agent raises a check or the occupier raises a check, it's just to confirm. So this is where, so I go back to the example of the warehouse. If we raised a check on that property, we would have to say in the check, right, our client has built a mezzanine and our client has built an office. And then you would see the strange situation that the check will lead to an increase. You would then go to challenge, but we would always, if you deal with a reputable agent, they would always talk that through with you, explain the information and rationale, because we would only do that if at challenge stage we had the rental evidence to show that the £45 I mentioned earlier was too high. So if we had the evidence to show that it should be 40, we would do that, because otherwise your client's leading to an increase when they don't have to currently, because at present the valuation office is obliged to maintain a correct rating list. That will change in 2029. That will then move to the ratepayer, and it will become a bit like self-assessment in tax. You will have to tell them what you've got at your property. If you don't tell them everything, you get fined. And the fines are a percentage of your rateable value plus a fixed amount. And on some of them, if it's quite bad, you can be imprisoned. But there's lots of that to come. Yes. So you do the check, then you do the challenge, which is where you discuss the values. So each stage, you have 3 outcomes. You have a reduction, an increase, or stays the same. So in our example, the check's gone up. We do the challenge has come down. So it's come down to £40 a metre. So you come in lower than where you were originally, but you've corrected it. So all your property's up to date and you don't need to go to the appeal, which is the old valuation tribunal stage. But if the valuation office says, oh no, we don't agree with you, it should be 40, it's staying as it is, you've got that option then to take it on to valuation tribunal for a panel completely separate to the valuation office to review all the information, but they can only review the information that you and the valuation officer have supplied at that time. You can't add new information, even if it came up. And there is a charge for small properties, it's £150, which you pay to the valuation tribunal, and £300 on the larger ones. So if you win your case, you get that money back.
And is the 2 outcomes of that case that you either go to the 40 or you go to whatever the council wanted? There's no kind of, actually, it should be 50, we've decided.
Well, the valuation officer would have to serve a notice to do that. But what you would do is you would take that to tribunal, because they obviously don't agree with you, because you're thinking it's 40 and they're thinking it's 50. That would be a matter you would take to the tribunal for them to decide.
But the tribunal can't actually come up with their own figure. It's either
Oh, yes, they can.
Oh, they can.
That is the
So
strange
they could
thing.
actually
Yes.
blow everyone out of the water and say it's 60.
Yes. And then that's when that sort of gets complicated, and it goes to lands tribunals and courts of appeal. Then after that, that's usually on the big complicated ones. But on the smaller ones, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. But no, sometimes the valuation tribunal, they've done property work. Some of them are completely separate, never done property, but some of them are retired surveyors. And so they will understand what's going on and have some knowledge of it, and they can use that to help.
Yeah, got it.
So, but then again, sometimes you get panels and you do get strange decisions.
Okay, so we've got this new valuation that's come in, or will be coming in 26. You can either check and challenge and appeal. And then you mentioned that equally, once we've sort of bedded down, yeah, we all agree this is the rateable value of this property. You've mentioned that those multipliers are going to change.
Yes. At present, we think that they're all going to come down, but there's going to be a top one, as I said, for people who've got a rateable value of over $500,000. So that can be offices, warehouses, hospitals, universities. They're all going to pay this extra. People would understand. I suppose for people who've got a shop in a town centre, it would be like a bid payment, actually. They all understand that. You pay the bid and it's used for specific things. It's not going to be called a bid, but it's going to be that same sort of thing. They'll get this extra payment, which will then be used to fund the smaller ones getting the lower multiplier.
Okay, and then for anyone that's listening and doesn't know what bid is, it's a business improvement district levy, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if you've got a property that is over that $500,000, you're going to be a little bit more afraid of 2026 than some of the smaller guys.
Yeah. Got clients who are very concerned that, they want to know what that level's going to be, because they've heard anything from 2.5p to 10p, which is quite substantial, particularly for NHS trusts. They don't know, which is the strangest thing. There at present, they are included in this, because when it was first muted, they were to get, this is to get all the online, people who've got warehouses to get them. But then we've pointed out as a body, like I'm a member of the RICS, which is the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and the RSA, Rating Surveyors Association. Both of them have said to the government, well, you're going to be charging universities and hospitals for this. They're not the people you were originally trying to target, but they're the ones who are getting hit in the, as the downside of it. So they've suddenly got to divert funds from, particularly hospitals, divert funds from frontline stuff to pay for rates on their site, which, that's my view. It's not right. So
Yeah. Okay. So the multiplier is going to go down for some of the lower properties, up for the higher properties. What else is changing? Anything else?
some people will be invited to test the duty to notify system that will start in 2029. We don't have too much information on that yet. It was basically to try out the portal to see how it's going to work, so go back to the warehouse again. So under the new system in 2029, you've got 60 days to tell the valuation office that you've put in the mezzanine floor once it's signed off, not while it's been built and finished off. Once it's been signed off by your builder that it's ready for use, you've got 60 days from there to notify the valuation office that you've put it up. So what would happen is in 2029, they'll get rid of the check stage, because every time you change something, you'll tell the valuation office, and pretty quickly, we hope, we expect when it first launches, there'll be quite a delay because they've got quite a backlog. You can imagine on the first day, everybody will be worrying about what's going to happen and, telling them, oh, I've put aircon in. Oh, I've changed my carpets. I've painted that wall, because we don't know yet how much detail they want from us. So we've just said to clients, look, we have to just tell them everything, because we don't want you getting the massive fines because they've said, oh, well, you didn't tell us that you put double glazing in, and you get fined. Until we get the legislation to know for definite what they want, what's the minimum requirements and stuff, we're preparing clients by telling them, anything you do, until we know differently, you tell them, because you don't want the fine.
So it's like a real-time information thing that's going to come in, and some people in 2026 will be the beta launch of that, and then 2029 is the expected launch.
Yes.
I bet it
Yes.
won't happen, Mark, because none of these things happen at time.
Well, it was supposed to start in 23 and it got pushed back.
Okay, so we're still 6 years below anyway, but we're 6 years
Yes.
late on this one, so it might have a chance.
It might. Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. What I'm getting from all of this is that this is a crazy system that doesn't seem to benefit anyone apart from the little operator that can get a little bit of small business rates relief. Everyone else is screwed. That's my opinion.
But everybody else, they do, the one thing I would say to them, they do need a reputable agent on their side, somebody who is a member of the RICS or the RSA or the IRRV. Because the reputable firms, they get reviewed by the valuation office and they won't let them register on their system. So if you get approached by, use this word, cowboy firm, and they're not registered on the VO's panel, because the VO does throw them off when they realize what they do, where they charge people for this, that, and the other, which you could do yourself because they're, not very upfront about. They then can say, right, oh, that agent's on that system, right, that's good. And then you've got somewhere to go as well if you've got an issue with them. Whereas, with the RICS, there's a complaint system, with the RSA and so on. So you have a fallback, but it also means that these people, like myself, have been doing it for a long time. And there's a reason we have clients and stuff, is because we've built up that reputation and we know they've got those facilities in place if they're not happy.
Absolutely. Okay, so just to finish off on this really complex subject, if you were investing, or if you had clients that wanted to invest in commercial property as a landlord, so they're going to be renting it out to tenants, obviously the best thing to do is to get something that's in demand, so that the tenants are always there and you're not left with an empty property. But the market changes, and it's a really hard place to be a commercial tenant and a commercial landlord. What would you say don't buy? For me, I'm saying I'm not going to buy anything that's got a rateable value over 500,000, because I don't want to be in that band. But what sort of opportunities, where would you say, look, if you go for this type of property, your liability is going to be okay-ish?
One good market that I see a lot of is serviced offices, little smaller ones that are, people can come in and go out there. That's their space. Little ditty office suites. That's quite a good marketplace, because for a number of reasons. From the landlord's point of view, sometimes the rateable value will be under the magic 2,900, depending on where you buy them. Obviously, serviced offices in London, your values are massive, so it's not going to help you, even if you've got the rooms the size of a desk, because the values are so high. Whereas Birmingham upwards, they would be worthwhile, because you can get a 4-person office with an assessment of, say, £1,800 in RV terms. So you're occupying that space, and they can get small business rates relief. And if they vacate, the landlord's not hit straight away for empty rates liability on it.
To do that one, you've got like 10 little offices that all, as you say, little 4-person office. It all works out quite nicely on that. They obviously have to have some sort of communal aspect to them. They've got communal hallways, they've got communal toilets. That then is the landlord's responsibility for the business rates, but that's separately rated. Is that correct?
No, toilets aren't rateable, and corridors. If it's only linking up all those assessments, that wouldn't be rateable either. But
Okay.
what would be is if the landlord's got kitchen, canteen, meeting rooms.
Okay.
That would be the residue for the landlord, but you wouldn't get the corridors in most cases. You'd only get the corridors in your assessment if that was all your accommodation.
Yeah.
So even though you've got little offices and you as a company occupied the whole floor, you would get the corridor. But individual offices, because that corridor links you to it, you can imagine it's like the high street. It's the pavement outside is not rateable, nor are toilets.
So the flexi workspace is a good opportunity. Any other good spots at the moment?
Last mile logistics, that is a big growth area.
I've not heard of that. Tell me more.
Well, basically, like the delivery guys that come to your door in a Ford Transit van,
Yep.
they've come from sometimes what's called the last mile. So it's a smaller hub. So they've got the bigger hubs that you'll see, the massive high bay things you'll see at the side of the motorways.
Yeah.
They travel from them, drop your parcels off at the smaller hub nearby. So as it say last mile, it's usually the last like 10, 20 miles, but it's a smaller hub, your county or and stuff, and it'll distribute from there. So all the little vans will come out of there as opposed to the big distribution shed.
Got it. What sort of size are those last mile logistic hubs?
They vary depending on the company and the location, because some of them will be happy to take a few smaller ones rather because they can't get the ideal size, so they could end up with 3. So we're doing those. Another one is self-storage, but that tends to be an investor one where people invested it and gets a third party to manage it for them.
Okay, all right. So there are the 3 that we've looked at so far. We've got the little workspaces, we've got some self-storage, and the last mile logistic hub. So if you are thinking about commercial at the moment, they could be some things that you'll look into. And I would say that having had this conversation with Mark, where I have learned so much already, that the one thing that I wish I'd done when I first started in my first commercial was to get Mark around at the design stage, because I think that could mitigate an awful lot of liability as a landlord if you were in, or someone like you were in, at that design stage.
Yeah, indeed. Because you can get carried away on bits and pieces and you don't realize what impact that's going to have, whether you actually need it.
Yeah. So there, big learning for me on that one. So, Mark, how do people get in touch with you if they do need some help on their commercial buildings and the rateable values?
They can go to Montagu Evans' website and they'll be able to find me under the people, and it will give my mobile and my email. I'd be very happy to help.
Mark is also going to be tagged in this episode, but you are based up in the northwest, and what's your reach in terms of geography?
I do Birmingham to the borders with Scotland and Northern Wales, and for some specialist pieces, NHS and fire and police, I go nationally.
Oh, okay. So you're the civil service man.
Yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. I have learned so much, Mark, and I actually feel like we probably have to get you back and just deep dive into some of the subjects that we've touched upon today, because we've done it at quite a high overview.
Yeah.
But yeah, invaluable information there for anyone that is considering investing in commercial property, but also for those that have got commercial property at the moment. So let's see, what date are we expecting this information on the 2026 list and the ratables? When will it come in? When will we know the fact?
We will get the draft list in November, December time, and the multipliers and stuff, we will probably get them at the budget in November.
Okay, all right. So we've 2025 in November-ish, we are going to know an awful lot more. And
Get more
actually, that's
information.
the best time. Let's reconvene, Mark, in November, December, and we can see what we're all up against.
Okay.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed and learned a few bits about commercial property and rateable values, and we will see you next time.